Joining me now is author of international bestsellers, including The War on the West and The Strange Death of Europe, one of the finest thinkers of his generation, Douglas Murray. And Douglas, you are right now under attack. The left in the UK are trying to cancel you. They want you banned from TV appearances. They want you to stop writing for publications like The Spectator. But it hasn't stopped there. Led by the likes of Alastair Campbell, he's a supposed former journalist turned Tony Blair spokesperson, New Labour spokesperson. He and others are wanting you arrested and charged for offensive commentary, also known as telling the truth. What is going on in the UK? And do you fear that police are scrutinising your tweets and interviews and things you've written?
Well, all that caused this was the fact that I've used my eyes in recent decades, and I've also used my pen. And I have described what has happened to my country of birth, Great Britain, and the continent of Europe, and indeed the wider developed world and the challenges that come through illegal and legal mass migration. That's not all migration, but illegal and legal mass migration. Interestingly enough, this interview that seems to have caused this breakdown from Alastair Campbell was one in which I simply said, what I describe in The Strange Death of Europe as happening is indeed what is now happening. And I said this, as many people have noted, not in a spirit of glee, but in one of deep lamentation. I never wanted to be proved right on this, and it gives me absolutely no joy to have been proven right, that the importing of very large numbers of people illegally and legally from very different cultures into a society which totally fails to integrate them will lead to massive problems, including at some point a massive backlash. Now, it's interesting that Alastair Campbell should have been one of the ones to try to start this pile on. Of course, Alastair Campbell was part of the Labour government that in the late 90s and early 2000s massively ramped up illegal and legal migration into the UK. He's actually one of the architects of this problem, a problem which one of his colleagues at the time described as being deliberate. See, one of his colleagues said he came out of meetings about this issue with a very clear feeling that the Labour government of Tony Blair wanted this mass movement of people into the UK to, quote, rub the right's nose in diversity. Well, of course, all these things had unexpected consequences. But Alastair Campbell is one of the people responsible for them. I'm only responsible for pointing out the facts and the lamentable situation that he got our country into. There's a couple of other things very quickly, Rita. Of course, this man, Campbell, is best known for his lying dossier about WMD in Iraq, which helped bounce Britain and other countries into the Iraq war. So if he had any kind of sense of decency, he would have disappeared from public life a long time ago. He was also, of course, the person who hounded Dr. David Kelly to suicide. And that's one of the really interesting things about Alastair Campbell. He's an unbelievable bully and a hack. And one of the things about him, like most hacks and bullies of his kind, he thinks that he can hide behind, as he always does, the claim that he himself is very mentally fragile. One of the interesting things about that is he can chase people like David Kelly to suicide. But if you criticize Alastair Campbell for his frequent bursts of utter insanity, he says that you are using his mental health against him. He's a totally sick individual on every possible level. I make no apology for pointing out the terrible things that he and his friends did to my country.
Well, your greatest crime appears to be that you were right. You wrote about this years ago. You warned about what was going to happen in The Strange Death of Europe. You were right when you warned of the unrest that would come in books like The Madness of Crowds and The War Against the West. And as the great Thomas Sowell wrote, people will forgive you for being wrong, but they will never forgive you for being right. And what you talked about, that mass migration, we've got that discussion happening right here in Australia. We've had record numbers coming in legally. But if they're not assimilating, if they don't share your values, as we've seen in the UK, you're going to have these problems, and just trying to stomp it out with two-tier policing and a justice system, Douglas, isn't going to solve the underlying issue.
No, absolutely not. I mean, as I've said for many years, the mass movement of people often who dislike the culture they're moving into intensely, and that always amazes me. I don't understand why people would move to societies that they dislike very much, but large numbers of people do, mainly just because they want to be in a system which can reward them at least to some extent financially, either through welfare or through the economy that works far better than the countries that they fled from. But if you bring people from very strong cultures with very strong ethnic identities and religious identities into countries that are completely apologetic, kowtowed, self-shamed, and embarrassed about their past, as is the story that has been pushed on the people of Australia in recent years, as has been the story pushed on the people of Britain, Europe, and America in recent years, you don't have a hope of integrating people. So yes, all of this stuff is absolutely predictable. It doesn't require a prophet. It just requires people with their eyes open and a willingness to tell the truth. And I hope that people do have their eyes open and continue to tell the truth, as I will. And I'm not going to be intimidated by any of these people who should have so much guilt on their consciences. I would be surprised that they dare to show their faces in public again.
Now, along with yourself, the other great enemy of the left right now appears to be Elon Musk, particularly amongst the political media activist class. Look at this deranged piece in The Guardian, where else, with the headline, "You know who else should be on trial for the UK's far-right riots? Elon Musk." That was the headline, and the piece goes on to call Musk one of the world's most prolific enemies of truth. This assault against free speech in the UK is really quite sinister, and I've got to say, effective. Of course, it's not going to silence the likes of Elon Musk, but the average person may refrain from posting something on their Facebook page when they see people being
Yes.
arrested for online posts for things that are considered offensive, not just threatening or abusive, but just offensive. It seems to be a line that you can't cross.
Yeah, absolutely, including retweeting videos of things that have happened. The interesting thing about Jonathan
Mm.
Freedland of The Guardian, he's a very obscure figure. He's not at all known outside of a small amount of the left wing in the UK. But of course, to think that somebody like him would have the audacity to claim that the British authorities should arrest an American citizen. I mean, I don't know if Jonathan Friedland knows his history. I assume he does. He's a relatively intelligent man. But he should know that America fought quite a significant war in order that American citizens would not, in fact, be under the writ of British law. And thank goodness Elon Musk isn't. And thank goodness he has the guts to continue, like a number of the rest of us, to say what is the truth. The interesting thing, by the way, about two things to say about Jonathan Freedland in this ridiculous piece. One is that Jonathan Freedland actually, after noticing the success of the Da Vinci Code and other sort of rather low boilerplate novels, started writing novels himself under a pseudonym. And one of them, published in 2017, is an extended wet dream about the idea of the assassination of President Trump. It's extremely open. That's the only skill of the book, such as it is that it's an excitable book for people who would have loved to see Donald Trump getting assassinated. On that principle, of course, perhaps the American authorities ought to ask for the extradition of Jonathan Freedland for writing a crappy genre novel under a pseudonym in which he dreams of the assassination of President Trump. Of course, it would be ridiculous to do so because nobody would read his book. But the other thing to be said about these people is that they just have this totalitarian, authoritarian instinct, which they just can't get rid of. They think everything should always go their way. They think they should be the censors of the town square. And the reason why you see so much of the media running against Elon Musk at the moment is that they recognize that his platform, Twitter, is beating all of them, or most of them, in all of the stakes, the
Mm.
media absorption around the world. And that's very scary for some of these old media who can't keep up and don't have very many readers, like The Guardian. But, it is a very important thing you mentioned there, Rita, that in actual fact, and Rowan Atkinson, no less, said this in a speech 11 years ago, it's perfectly possible, you see, that people like me, billionaires like Elon Musk, will be able to get through this era and will survive it. And I certainly plan to, and I'm sure and know that Musk does as well. But what about, as you say, the person who does not have the platform that I have or the means that Elon Musk has? What about them when, as is happening all the time at the moment in the UK, police forces that have not solved one burglary, yes, you heard that right, not one burglary in recent years, are knocking on people's doors and arresting them for Facebook posts, for retweeting things? Sure, there are some people who've said some horrible things and disgraceful things in recent weeks, but oh my, the priorities of the British police. They are really treading into very, very dangerous Orwellian waters. It turns out, and the rest of the public in Britain can't trust them to solve a burglary. Would I trust them to police my speech? No, I don't think so.
No. And the treatment you're receiving, the treatment Elon Musk is receiving, is what Donald Trump has been copping for some years now. And his 2-hour chat with Elon Musk had a lot of the media triggered. It did reach an enormous audience despite having technical issues at the start. But look at some of the media coverage we were treated to. This is from USA Today. Starts with this line: for a fascism curious billionaire who loves cuddling up to right-wing loons. I mean, and it got progressively worse from there, Douglas. Trump's called the media the enemy of the people. And sadly, it seems there are many in the industry who seem desperate to live up to that tag.
I mean, these are just dying entities. I mean, USA Today is such a failing newspaper. It's as thin as a loo roll, and it's just an unbelievable rag now, and almost no information in it unless you want to follow the baseball, which lots of people do. But in terms of news, it's just the worst possible way to absorb news. But they just have an agenda, and they just show it more and more. They describe Elon Musk as a fascist. They describe the former president of the United States, maybe the next president, as just a right-wing loon. And these people, you can write their headlines and their articles before the event occurs, and I'm sure some of these people do. I bet that guy decided to do that. And of course, they don't point out that it seems, whatever your criticisms of Donald Trump, he did this very lengthy conversation with Elon Musk. It's rather more than we've seen from Kamala Harris in recent weeks. But of course, they don't mention that. They don't note that, because it's just the backing chorus of the Democratic Party. That's all these dying media brands are. The public can see it for what it's worth. And if you want a little bit of dying left-wing media commentary with your baseball results, I suppose you can go to USA Today. But it turns out most of the world is going to X, Twitter.
Well, the reach of that interview is astonishing, unlike really anything you see elsewhere. Now, I want to, before you go, play you a little clip from the Stephen Colbert Show featuring CNN anchor Caitlin Collins. What is curious here, or pleasing, is the crowd reaction when Colbert makes this claim.
I know you guys are objective over there, that you just report the news as it is. No, I know. CNN makes a... I know.
Was that supposed to be a laugh line?
I wasn't supposed to be, but I guess it is.
Douglas, even his leftist crowd just burst out laughing at that claim that CNN just reports the news. They're just straight down the line, unbiased. And this... diminishing trust in institutions, including the media, the police we've spoken about, and judiciary increasingly. It's not healthy, but I think in a way it is healthy that people are actually getting awareness of some of the double standards that exist.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this institutional distrust is, as I said to you before, Rita, we've discussed this. It's about the fact the public can see through these institutions. If a police force doesn't solve burglary, doesn't even go to the scene of a crime, but it does go for a Twitter X post, there's a problem of priorities in the police force. Likewise, in the media, when you see the coverage of things like CNN, it's not just that it's biased in its stance. Not everything, by the way. Occasionally, there's something on CNN that's relatively good and relatively impartial. But the thing is, but what they actually what gives it away time and again is what they choose to focus on. They choose to focus on things that boost the narrative that they have, whether that's foreign policy, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the war in Israel and Gaza, or whether it's things domestically, whether it's just puffing up their candidate to get her into office in November. And I was delighted to see that. I mean, I just can't watch Stephen Colbert most of the time. Almost nobody does. But I mean, he started off as a comedian. Now he's just become one of these sermonizers, boring sermonizers of the American left in what used to be late night comedy slots. But it was wonderful to see that his audience was wiser than he was and knew more than he did and laughed in the face of the idea that CNN simply attempts to report the truth.
It was the best moment of the whole interview, and unintentionally funny. Douglas Murry, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Great pleasure as always. Thank you, Rita.